everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon video. Today is going to be a bit of a different video, talking about something that's been on my mind recently when it comes to the overall design of Digimon, and that's going to be Digimon and Engines. So, what exactly is an engine? Well, engines are obviously stuff that make objects move, like your cars and whatnot, but the more broad answer in perspective when it comes to TCGs is an engine is a player-made term that's used and referred to a card or series of cards that, when played, greatly increases a player's draw and search speed, thus helping them burn through their deck faster. So, it just makes your deck move more efficiently is essentially what it all boils down to. And most of the time, engines are highly generic. You could have specific engines, but when it comes to Digimon and engines, the genericer the betterer. That's not necessarily great English, but you get the idea. So, what does this exactly mean for Digimon? Because Digimon didn't exactly used to have engines, and that's part of what made Digimon unique and special, is you just had your own archetype, your things worked inside of your archetype, and your archetype is what made your archetype move. And things didn't really like to spread outside of that, but since Digimon has introduced a lot more power creep since its inception, things have obviously changed quite a bit. So for us, what this means is still mostly the same thing. Engines are allowing us to churn and burn through our deck as efficiently as possible, but because Digimon is a different TCG compared to most others, it also is talking about the efficiency in which we're able to use our cards because of the memory system. So while we're trying to dig and search through our deck as fast as we possibly can, we're also trying to be as efficient as possible at the same time. So, for most engines in Digimon, they usually make up about 3/5 of the entire deck. So, that's kind of normal if you look at other TCGs and their engines, but that's not necessarily the best thing. It's just the trends that I kind of noticed when it comes to engines. But the most common change to any engine in Digimon, more specifically, is going to be in the level 6 and level 7 lineup, which is also known as your win con most of the time. But there's not that much flexibility when it comes to running an engine or a deck running an engine as far as outside cards that they're actually allowed to run because of how much deck space that engine takes up total. But depending on the engine that you're running, there is going to be a flexibility in some of the other levels and options or tamers to try to best support the win con. So when using an engine, it does tend to simplify deck building and gameplay as a result, because you're going to be utilizing your engine to do the same exact thing every single game. And if everyone's using the same couple of engines, then the game kind of becomes boring and stale as a result. But that aside, engines tend to be some of the most efficient ways to be able to let your deck do what it needs to do using any top end or win con for the respective engine. So sometimes engines are also referred to as packages. Packages generally are going to be smaller sized engines, is basically the big differentiation between what we refer to as a package versus an engine. But what exactly are the top 5 engines in Digimon? So one thing to note is that these are going to be as of EX8, so obviously the later the game goes, the more engines they could possibly introduce on top of any ban and restriction list. That's going to change the overall flow and functionality of certain engines. But these will be in no particular order because I find all of these engines to be highly strong, very flexible, and versatile in terms of what they're able to do as an engine. And, well, okay, maybe the exception of number 5. I think number 5 is obviously going to be the weakest one, but 1 through 4 I rank pretty much all on the same power spectrum. So when it comes to top 5s, you usually want to start with some honorable mentions, and I think that these 2 engines that I'm going to be highlighting right here are really good encapsulations of what kind of an engine is. And while I don't necessarily think these engines are the strongest, they're not bad either. They're just not necessarily following exactly the same normal trend as the rest of the top 5. So the 2 engines I'm going to be highlighting really quickly are going to be be the Plant Engine and the DNA Engine. So the DNA Engine, to start off with that, doesn't necessarily mean it's just specifically these two cards. These two cards are just the highlight and idea of what the DNA Engine is. So the DNA Engine mostly comes from like BT16. It's playing the Duo Tamers. That's helping set up some rookies to be able to Digivolve into champions to have easy access at DNAs. Obviously, Imperial Dramon and Pile Dramon is doing this the best compared to all of the others. But that also means that they're taking up more deck space than your normal engine. So literally the only real flexibility that you have when it comes to the Paildramon engine, more specifically when it comes to how DNAs play, is just going to be in the level 6s. You really don't have much flexibility anywhere else compared to some of the others. But I find that the DNA engine is a highly generic engine, letting you use very similar low ends to be able to go up into any specific top end that you feel like you want that best supports what the entire deck is trying to do. But the Plant Engine is going to be your more stereotypical engine, as a really good idea and concept of what it is, because usually you'll have cards that help you gain memory or save memory in some way, shape, or form, while also having cards that help play out other cards and help with your overall card draw at the same time. So that's kind of just the good encapsulation on what kind of defines a Digimon engine, which is what makes these the best honorable mentions. But when it actually comes into the top 5, at number 5, I have Yellow Vaccines. So Yellow Vaccines is a very interesting engine because this is probably the most RNG dependent engine because of how Patamon works. Patamon kind of is the key card that just enables a lot of what this engine is able to do. You can kind of use whatever eggs you feel like you want to use with this engine, but Patamon is going to be the key card because he's working with Yellow Vaccines, and the main combo of this is use Patamon to Digivolve from your security for free into ideally Gatomon. So Gatomon, when a card is removed from a security, gains you a memory. Patamon already just Digivolves for free, so the fact that this is already a free transaction means that you're gaining at least one memory off of Gatomon, because Gatomon does see itself leave the security. And the other interesting aspect is that even if you don't Digivolve into Gatomon for that extra one memory, Patamon does have the inheritable ability to gain you a memory when your cards are added to security, which it does see the conclusion of its own effect. So even without the Gatomon, you're still gaining one memory off of the Patamon, which is incredibly efficient Digivolving into a level 4 Digimon. Obviously, Gatomon's the best because of that one extra memory, so it's actually a +2 memory versus a +1 memory normally. And we do have other cards that could help try to rig our security or help with the deck's overall flow and functionality on top of a nice floodgate. But regardless of whatever level 4 you're actually going to be using, it's just the fact that Patamon helps with your memory efficiency that leads you into any level 5 you feel like you want it to be, and that's kind of where like the memory boosts and the scrambles come in to be able to help you save even more memory on climbing up your stages. So you already, let's just say, started at 1 memory off of Patamon. You'll gain 2 for Digivolving into a Gatomon off of Patamon's effect. So now that 1 memory turns to 3 memory, so you don't even need any extra memory incentive in order to be able to go up into your level 5, which then allows you to keep turn and be able to pass turn by Digivolving into a level 6. But that's kind of where any extra memory we have to play around with is going to be helpful at going up into your level 6 and not even passing turn, because we do have teamers that can help generate extra memory. We obviously have some options that can help save us on memory, and that just allows us to easily use any level 6 that we want inside of Yellow or can Digivolve off of Yellow. Ideally, it would want to be a Yellow Vaccine, but it doesn't exclusively have to be, which is what's making this engine so powerful. But again, it is more RNG dependent because this deck was more consistent with its usage of Patamon thanks to one of its main tamers, but because the tamer was so good at setting up the Patamon, they decided to limit it to 1, so it did hurt the overall consistency on how well this engine functions, but when it goes, it goes. So this brings us to the number 4 engine, which is going to be what we refer to as the Galaxy engine. The whole point of this engine is actually really insane on how all of the cards just flow and function into one another, because you have your rookies basically gaining you or saving you on memory when you're going to be digivolving, and then they also have an inheritable ability to be able to put the top Digimon to the bottom of the stack to be able to gain that benefit on allowing you to go into another Digimon, ideally of the same level, utilizing the same resources that you just spent. The only issue with this engine, and it's not really an issue, it's just what's making this engine so good, is the fact that we do actually have ways to save on memory on that second evolution, which is what's making this engine so powerful to begin with. So it wants you to use that same memory to basically have a net zero loss, but we do have cards like the Koensaiyo and the BT16 Galgamon that actually gain you additional memory or make your evolution free, so it's turning that supposed net zero into an actual positive. And that positive, on top of the extra Digivolutions that the deck is doing because of all of the cycling on the same Digimon that it's doing, just helps the deck be more consistent. But the fact that we could basically just go up into our level 5s, which also have a way to save themselves on memory, for basically a net zero, again, just allows us to use any level 6 that we want. And the crazy thing with the Galaxy engine is because the colors that it's playing in allows us to use any level 6 Digimon that could digivolve off of red or blue. Right now, the best way to play it is mostly primarily blue focused, but we still have some really good cards that can digivolve off of red that we could think about using. It's just the fact that, again, we're just drawing because of all of the extra evolutions help make the deck more consistent, and the way that all of the abilities line up just, again, make it super easy and efficient to go up into a level 5 and not pass turn to use any level 6 that we feel like we want. And that's, like, again, the common trend between a lot of these engines. Next, at number 3, we have Fishin' for Dogs, or the Blue Dog engine, or what people most likely refer to as the Mirage engine. But again, this is another engine that doesn't necessarily need the big boss monster it sometimes is named after. So the idea of the engine is actually centered around Honkunmon. So Honkunmon allows you to be able to spit out an extra body from its inheritables. It's obviously going to be a level 3 body, but that's what triggers the Egg Bukamon to be able to help us save memory on the level 5 more specifically, which again, the whole point of a lot of these engines is just be as cheap and efficient as possible while drawing as many cards as possible. So the crazy thing about this is with what the Gao cards are doing. So you have the EX for Gaomon that when it's played draws a card, which Honkunmon can spit out. So that way we're drawing an additional card when we spit out our primary rookie. And when we're using our primary rookie in the raising area, we're obviously going to be moving it out to digivolve into the main level 4, which is the BT16 Galgamon, which is making another appearance as a really powerful card. Because when you digivolve into him, he's going to allow us to draw a card and to draw a card for evolution. So we're drawing 2 cards off of this while forcing the opponent to draw 1 card, which is triggering the inheritable ability off of the Gaomon to gain a memory. And if the opponent has enough cards in their hand, we also get to gain another memory. So again, here is another example of a free evolution into a level 4 Digimon. So if we have any way to be able to save on that memory or use that memory efficiently, it's just turning the gains into actually positives. So now you're gaining memory for digivolving with the help of some of the cards that save you on that memory. So again, that's kind of where things are being really powerful. And from here, because he has jamming, attacking with our higher stages is pretty safe. But even if we don't have the usage of our best level 4, we still have other level 4s that could help bounce a Digimon to be able to trigger the inheritable on the Gao to be able to gain us a memory that way. Obviously, the EX for Gao is going to be the best because we could use its inheritable ability comboed with strong Kun because the Gaomon that we're going to be spitting out forces both players to draw a card, and this now sees that ability, so that way it could save an additional memory, at least on our level 5, on top of our egg doing that. So you could kind of just see a lot of the efficiencies on just what the low end is doing more specifically. And again, because we're in blue, we could basically run any Digimon that's going to be digivolving off of blue to best support what this deck is trying to do. But any Digimon that's adding cards to the opponent's hand is going to be really fantastic in this engine, which is a good half of what blue is trying to do. Even if that's not what blue is trying to do, we've still seen examples where we're running cards like Hexablaumon, where it's not necessarily bouncing cards to the opponent's hand, it's just a very strong blue generic Digimon for us to run, and that's just where this engine or package shines, because this is just so self-included on how everything is flowing and functioning to be able to not only be as consistent as possible, but save as much memory as possible, so you could go up into your level 6 to do kind of just whatever you feel like you want to do, and it's just up to the supporting cards that you're going to include inside of the deck to fill up those holes to best support whatever win con you're going to be playing, whether it's Mirage or not. And next at the number 2 slot, we have another dog engine. This time it's the Purple Dog engine, also known as Dark Animals. So the Dark Animal engine, obviously it's an engine like all of the others. The whole goal and idea is to try to save as much memory as possible, glowing up your stages, so that way you could make the deck as consistent as possible as well, not only just for those evolutions, but taking advantage of all of the different effects that are going on inside of the engine itself. So we saw off of Mirage where it has abilities to allow us and the opponent to draw extra cards, but the Dark Animal engine only is letting us draw extra cards, because we do have lots of effects that draw cards. The only downside, which actually isn't a downside because this is purple and purple likes to play with cards in our trash, is the fact that when we're drawing half the time we're going to be discarding, but again, that's not really a problem because we play cards out of our trash anyway, which this engine does in strides. So you do have Goblimon that rewards us when we're going to be discarding a card with a memory, which is already kind of insane, on top of the fact that the Sunomon egg allows us to draw a card when we're going to be discarding. So just these two alone allow us to be hyper efficient, which going into our primary level 4 Digimon, which is going to be Dobermon, allows us to draw and discard. We don't care about any of the other abilities that are going on with this card. It does have some other case uses that you could try to capitalize and maximize on, but at worst, it's a card that's just allowing us to, when we Digivolve, draw and discard, to trigger both the Gobly and the Suno inheritable. So just utilizing the Gobly inheritable means that this is a level 4 that's going to evo for essentially 1, and again, any memory savers, which a lot of decks generally run the same few options, which is going to be a combination of the scrambles, memory boosts, and or training cards, just help make the deck even more efficient as a whole, because these are the ways that we're going to not only just consistently find whatever parts and pieces that we need while giving the opponent as little to interact with as possible, but it also helps us with our overall memory management so we can make one big power turn going into our level 6 and ideally not passing turn, so we could use that level 6 to try to win the game with. So Dobermon being an X-antibody also allows us to run some X-antibody options, and Protoform is kind of like the X-antibody Hammerspark, where it's not gaining us a memory, it's just saving us a memory by digivolving for a reduced cost of 1, but the fact that it's a 0 cost option means that essentially we still just net 1 memory off of it. So any way we could digivolve into Dobermon more efficiently means, again, we could turn the memory gain into more of a boon, so we could do more plays, like digivolving into a level 5 Digimon, but the draw and discard, again, is one of the big pulls on why we are going to be using Cerberus X, because again, if we didn't trigger it off of our Dobermon, we're definitely triggering the Gobly and Suno inheritable off of Cerberusmon. And Cerberusmon, while it has X antibody or its base form underneath him, then we also get to play out a level 3 Digimon from our trash, which is incredibly strong because we could use that with some other on-play abilities to dig out or be more consistent or retrieve whatever we want. It just gives us a ton of flexibility while also potentially triggering the inheritables of some of our other Digimon, where it gains us a memory when Digimon are being played by an effect, which we do have 2 cards to do that. So even if we don't have Goblymon, we can still use Labramon and Dobermon to be able to save on as much memory as possible, while the fact that we just drew essentially 2, discarded 1 on 2 stages means that most likely we're digging 4 to 6 cards deep, depending on what the rest of our setup is, which is incredibly strong when it comes to just the amount of digging or searching, and that's not, again, on top of any other things that we've done prior to being able to combo off with this engine. And then because of this, we could use basically any X antibody level 6 Digimon in purple that we want, which is already pretty strong because we have a lot of decent options, but it's not exclusively to just X antibodies. We can still just use any purple level 6 because we have that efficient of ways to be able to digivolve up into level 5 and not pass turn. So that's kind of the whole idea on the Dark Animal engine. The Dark Animal engine in purple as a whole just actually has a generic staple when it comes to the level 6s in the form of Anubismon, because not only are you already playing Labramon because its ability synergizes with Cerberusmon, but Labramon can also retrieve your one of Anubismon, so your one of is not actually a one of, and because this card can play out basically any Digimon and delete level 5s, and if it's not doing any of that, then it's at least drawing you cards, is just, again, part of what makes the Dark Animal engine just so strong and hyper efficient that there's no real reason for any purple deck that's trying to digivolve into a stack to not use this engine. And then when it comes to the number 1 engine, we have the Purple Hybrids engine. So the Purple Hybrids engine is actually comprised of 2 different packages mainly. So you have the little Ukomon package where you're using the Ukomons and Louis to be hyper aggressive, chipping with your rookies and being hyper efficient with not only just your memory, because we have an Ukomon to help save us on memory, or technically gain us memory, but we also have an Ukomon that's helping search through our deck. And because they're resetting our raising area, we could constantly use it over and over again to apply lots of good pressure onto the opponent. And we do have some really good inheritable abilities on our eggs that we want to take advantage of when our Digimon gets deleted, which ideally we're going to be doing because we're attacking into their security. So that way we could trigger these to help us gain additional resources. So you could kind of see just from the Ukomon package where the resource generation is kind of starting, but it's not just exclusively to the Ukomon package, because we still do have options that help us save on memory and grab back whatever cards we feel like we need, so that way we could keep the pressure going. And the main way that we're going to be keeping the pressure going is basically the pseudo infinite value loop, where it's going to be Duskmon, the Matt and Koichi tamers on top of Velgermon. So Duskmon, when you digivolve into him, obviously he changes the color of one of the opponent's Digimon. That's more of an effect that combos with Velgermon to make Velgermon stronger, but the primary pull on this card is the fact that he could digivolve into Velgermon in our trash, which we're in purple, so we have various ways of setting that up, like off of our Koichi tamers. Then when we're going to be attacking, we're digivolving into our Velgermon, so that way we can not only just use Velgermon to be able to delete himself at the end of our attack, but we also have the inheritable ability on Duskmon, which is arguably one of the most important inheritable abilities in the whole deck, where it's allowing us to play out a tamer for free. So that's really important at just making sure that we're never losing any tempo or value when it comes to our overall field presence and pressure, because the tamer that we're using ideally is going to be the one that we're replacing, or replacing the tamer that we just used with a different one that could put us into a more beneficial position. So The whole combo is we're going to swing with Dusk, Digivolve into Velgar. Velgar's going to mill cards off of both players based on the amount of colors that we have, which Dusk is going to be setting up more colors so Velgar can be stronger. Velgar's going to delete himself so that way we could play out the Tamer. Then the main Tamer is going to be the BT7 Koichi, which on delete gains us a memory, or when we play it, draws and discard. So the draw and discard makes the deck more consistent. On top of the on delete gaining us memory, just allows us to be more memory efficient. So if we have a lineup of Tamers, we could start with Koichi and then end in something else to try to save on as much memory as possible to make our plays that much more efficient. But when it comes to re-grabbing the Duskmon, that's why we still have some option cards to help us grab back the Duskmon, and we even have 2 Tamers that allow us to do that as well, in the form of Matt Ishida, which allows us to grab back our options too, so we have more flexibility and customization on how we could utilize our options and our Digimon. And Koichi is more hard-locked to our hybrids, but that's not necessarily a problem when we're just going to be looping it, and the fact that we're always going to have a Tamer means that we could always use Duskmon to Digivolve on top of said Tamer, which he's going to replace when we go full combo. So that's kind of the whole point and idea of this engine, is just using 2 different packages and smushing them together, and because of the overall efficiency and different ways that we're playing this engine, we could use a whole slew of various different top ends to try to support what this value package is doing as a whole. So this brings us towards the end of the video and to the big question on, are engines bad for the game? So I think that the answer is actually kind of complicated personally because, well, yes, it does allow various other Digimon and WinCons that weren't necessarily seeing play before actually get some play because they might have been struggling to find a home or their own native support doesn't really work as well. Engines kind of just feel like a cop-out to me, where it's just a generic normal package that pretty much everyone is going to be running, and then the only real difference when it comes to the deck are just some small tech choices and the level 6s that they're going to be playing, or WinCons more commonly. So in the past, Digimon has actually tried to fight against engines from forming because the game already has a generic design problem. Because generic game design for Digimon is incredibly dangerous to be working with, as we've seen it just kind of tends to overshadow the entire rest of the game, which is kind of a shame because there's a lot of different cards that we would want to see play that kind of just are forced to not see play because they're not going to be as efficient as engines, especially when engines are taking up at least 3/5 of your average deck. So other games do have engines, I do want to point that out. It's not exclusively a Digimon problem, so this isn't really something new. I do want to point out that each game with its different systems, mechanics, how they design and balance their cards, what their bans and restriction lists look like, there's a whole bunch of different ways that they handle how engines can impact their overall game. And I think that engines, they do have space to be healthy, but they also have just as much space to be unhealthy, really limiting and forcing game design to go in particular directions if they are going to be designing around engines or not designing around engines. And right now, I think that Digimon isn't necessarily that well equipped yet to be able to handle these types of engines because Bandai's already tried to handle some of these in the past. They just don't want to kill it outright because they think that some engines that are hyper generic aren't necessarily as generic as they like to think, and they don't want to try to kill off as many decks as they possibly can, even if we're all just going to be playing the same couple of packages or engines for each particular color based on whatever is actually getting support and what's the most efficient way to play it at the time. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts about this discussion down in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to leave that like and subscribe if you like this type of content and you want to see more. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date when I go live next with either my live streams or when I post videos. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their time, and I'll see you in the next video.